everyone, I'm Emily. I talk about remote work, traveling abroad, and building businesses. So I commonly get asked this question about how do I find a legitimate remote role in this market right now? And as your older sister, or maybe we're the same age, I don't know, I'm here to tell you the harsh reality of what this market currently looks like, what remote managers are probably looking to hire, how I found my remote roles in the past and currently, and what I think of the future of remote work. So a lot of my experiences probably are based between working in the US and working abroad, specifically in Singapore. I do want to preface that this is just my opinion. Maybe things are changing rapidly. It is also August of 2024. Maybe a year from now, the market will be doing a lot better, but this is the current situation of what I've been seeing. So a lot of my friends who work in big tech like Meta, Google, Netflix, they're all heading back to work. So it's usually Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And it really depends, right? And it is kind of like you have to go into work. There is no ifs and buts. But what we've been seeing is that there is a move going back to hybrid for these large tech companies because probably they have a lease, they need to have butts in those seats. And so they're kind of urging them to go back to office. So just know that there is kind of been this like transformational shift for big tech at least to get those butts into offices. If you're really looking for a remote role, your best bet right now in this market is probably working in a startup. Startups can range from like a small team of 5 to a couple hundred, depending on their series of funding. But I will say, because startups are trying to save costs, they're trying to extend their runway, they're probably not going to be needing to pay for an office. They might have like a WeWork location or something like that you can pop in and out of. But most startups, at least from what I've seen, are still trying to save costs so that they're fully remote, or they have some sort of flexibility where like they want you to be based somewhere, maybe a certain state or whatever, but it is still fully remote. And obviously, if you've been following the news, you know that there have been mass layoffs. There's been really loud ones. There's been very quiet ones. I was looking at a couple of roles recently, and for all of them, there's at least 100 applicants or more. Even my engineering friends are having trouble finding a role in this economy. So that also gets you thinking, right? Like, do you need a job that badly? Are you willing to negotiate or compromise on certain things? I think those are the questions that you need to ask yourself. I also do want to share though, if you are talking to a certain company and they're not very clear on what the hybrid or work from home policy is, make sure that you have it in writing on your contract or that you know what you're getting yourself into. I was part of the startup that I joined thinking that we could have work from home flexibility. Turns out the CEO didn't communicate that to the CTO, and the CTO wanted everyone 5 days in a week, whereas the CEO was like, oh, like I'm okay with, whatever you do. But ultimately, after 3 months, I ended up leaving because 1, they had lied to me, and 2, it just wasn't a right culture fit. But ultimately, I think if you really are looking for something, make sure you have it in writing, make sure that it is in your contract and that you are okay with it moving forward. That was one of the most annoyances and biggest mistakes I've made. So I really wish I had harped on it and had it in writing. Let's talk about what hiring managers are looking for. So I've been on the hiring end before, as well as the one looking for a job. So I know kind of what it looks like and how it feels to be hiring for one role that there's probably more than 100 applicants from. So not to harp on this, but definitely number 1 is any referral, any mutual connection, any way to talk to the recruiter at the company or to talk to the hiring manager or someone at the company to give you some insight on how the hiring process works. That is honestly your best bet. It is just way too competitive, and I'm not trying to be negative Nancy over here. I'm just trying to tell you that in order for you to compete with all these hundreds of other applicants, you must stand out. And usually it is through connections or basically having an online presence, showing the kind of work that you've done, or having projects to show that you can actually do the work. I've seen my startup founder friends hire, and usually it's kind of just all through connection. It's more of like someone saying, hey, I'm looking for a social media manager. Does anyone know X, Y, and Z? And then we'll basically send our recommendations and she'll interview a couple of them. And that's how it's really been done in business and probably at tech companies or anywhere you go. From the hiring side, what I am impressed by is when someone has built a project that's relevant, has kind of built an online brand, has thought leadership, or has shown operationally that they can do the work. It's even more impressive when someone reaches out to me saying like, I love what you've been doing, etc. They maybe read an article that I've worked on or a project that I've worked on, or they've alluded to reading some of my material or understanding who I am as a person, and then being able to tie it back to the role. I feel like that's very, very impressive. I don't think it's impressive for someone to just have like a standard resume anymore, because everyone else has that. How are you going to stand apart from the crowd? And while you are looking for a remote job right now, to be able to build up those skills, I maybe am a little bit old school, because you know what? I took freaking 3 unpaid internships before, finding a paid internship and then finding a job. But I think those skill sets were helpful in the terms of building my portfolio of the stuff that I could do. And then I could bring it to the employer and be like, hey, these are the things that I've done in the past, and this is how it's relevant to the role that I could work for you, etc. So just kind of thinking of like how you're going to push yourself up to the top of the applicant pool, how you're going to make yourself more appealing. And I think lastly as well, which takes emotional quotient, takes EQ, is, are you a good person? Would I enjoy working with you? Do I find you headstrong or a little bit too difficult to work with? Like, as a manager, I want to work with someone who is great at their job and is fun to work with, is good to work with, is someone that I would want on my team and be proud of on my team. So those are kind of things that you also need to take into account. So in the past and currently right now, I have worked in certain remote roles. Previously, when I was abroad during the pandemic in Singapore, I worked at Stripe. And it was interesting because during the pandemic, obviously everyone was working from home, and Stripe had a work from home policy, which was like, please stay at home if you're feeling sick or unwell. There wasn't anything super set in stone back then. And so what I would do actually is I would schedule time to go into office maybe twice a week with my coworkers and my team so that we would be there at the same time. Obviously, things are really different. I have been able to secure a couple of other projects with certain startups, all simply by pitching them this certain role. And I think when you're pitching to work remotely for a company, just know that you're a contractor or a freelancer, etc. I guess you need to be able to do your own taxes. That's a whole separate topic. But basically, if you are proposing to work for these certain companies on like a contract or freelancer basis, you should reach out to them and appeal to them, have a rate ready to go. And so I did this with a couple of startups. I was doing like kind of project work with them. So one lasted like 3 months, another lasted 6 months. The work that I'm doing right now is Monday through Wednesday, and it's been 3 months. It is interesting because you get to manage your own time more, but they don't provide you benefits like the health insurance or, a 401k, etc. They really do just treat you as a contractor or just like kind of like a worker bee sometimes. But if you're in a consulting role, then obviously you'll be consulting more instead of being in an operational role, because maybe I have put in the work when I was in my 20s. I did the whole like 5 days a week in office, the 45-minute one-way commute back and forth, squished into a bus on a sardine. I personally just don't really want to go back into office, or I would like the option of, but I do not want to be forced to go 5 days in a week again. It's just a different mentality, and I think this is something that I feel very strongly about. But unfortunately, because everyone else wants to work from home and they also want that flexibility, there's going to be more competition. And so if you're really needing a job and you're needing some financial stability, maybe it is worth it to find a job first and then figure it out later on. Or if you're really gung-ho about working remotely, then it's either continuing to apply or starting to be a freelancer or a consultant, etc., things like that. So I hope all of this was super helpful. These are the things that I would tell my younger self, or I would tell my younger peers, or anyone who's interested in remote work, because this is the stark reality of things. It's not impossible. It's just going to be a little harder. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer them. I love talking about this stuff and like kind of hacks and interesting ways to get your foot in the door. If you have any other questions for me to talk about or discuss, let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.